in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon for most of you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Corey Nicoletti, and I'll be moderating this session for the Technical and Tools track. This session is Gradebook Enhancements project. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded. You'll receive an email announcement once the recordings are available. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel, but we will be saving the questions until the end. The presenters for this session are Kyle Blythe and Steve Swinsberg. Kyle is a product analyst for NYU, New York University. He works with project teams to gather requirements and provide functional expertise. Kyle has also provided technical support, guidance, and training to faculty and staff at NYU. Steve is the founder of Flying Kite, a software house based in Canberra, I might have said that wrong, sorry if I butchered that, Australia, specializing in custom development for Sakai. Steve has over 10 years experience in developing with the Sakai CLE and has supported many universities in rolling out successful implementations of Sakai across the globe. He's a core developer in Sakai and is the current PMC Vice Chair and was an Apereo Foundation board member for 2 years. Steve is also a recipient of the Sakai Foundation Fellows Award. If you guys are ready to go ahead and get started.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kyle Blythe. I'm the product analyst for NYU's instance of Sakai. So today I'll be talking through and demoing the work that the team has been doing on the Gradebook Enhancements project, otherwise known as Gradebook NG. I'm joined by the esteemed Steve Swinsberg, one of our 2 brilliant developers who's been making all this awesomeness happen. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the other 2 members of our team who weren't able to make it for this session today. Jeff Patch is the PM for this project and is really responsible for making all of this happen. Peyton Giles is our other very talented developer on this project. Now, we have a lot of great functionality to show you within the tool, but I'd like to start off by talking about the origins and methodology behind this project. So, why did we choose to make changes to the Gradebook tool? What really got this going was seeing the results of 2 different faculty surveys at NYU where the Gradebook really emerged as the tool with the highest level of faculty dissatisfaction. This wasn't really a huge surprise to us, though. We'd also received feedback through help tickets on the Gradebook and through feedback and consultations and trainings with faculty. So we were pretty sure we wanted to improve the Gradebook tool, but weren't exactly sure where to start or whether it was even a good idea. So how did we decide what to do? We looked through the comments within our survey results to find specific pain points as well as feedback from help tickets. We also did user interviews where we had faculty members show us how they used the current Gradebook. This helped us to identify potential areas of improvement with the tool. And at the same time, Jeff started talking to folks in the community to get their input and see if this was a good idea and whether it would be possible to implement this in time for Sakai 11. This includes Sam from Longsight, Steve Swinsberg, Aaron Zakowski, Sean from Columbia, Earl, Dr. Chuck, and others. And what started to emerge from these conversations was a fairly simple and narrow scope. So the big one here is a Spreadsheet Entry interface. This is something other Gradebook tools out there have, and it just seemed that the Sakai Gradebook was somehow behind by not having this. And our faculty were explicitly asking for this functionality in the survey data. So it seemed to make sense as a much faster way to enter grades and simplify the interface. ImportExport. So this one may have emerged a little bit later on into our user interviews and through our own digging into the Gradebook. So in our user interviews, when we asked people to upload a spreadsheet into the Gradebook, they could just never remember which place to go. There are actually 2 different processes for doing this in Gradebook 1, each of which accomplish very different things. So we felt we could simplify and consolidate these processes. Additionally, we also knew that some people would always just do their grade calculations in Excel. You can't fight it. They're going to want to grade on a curve or apply some fancy formula to their grades, and we knew right off the bat that we didn't want to build in more complexity to the tool. Once you start trying to incorporate too much, it's going to get unwieldy and negatively impact the user experience. So we wanted to make this process of downloading and then being able to import grades back into the system for them as easy as possible. And speaking of the user experience, we knew we just wanted to have a better and more modern experience for folks that are using the tool. And in line with that, we wanted the tool to be accessible. And accessibility, user experience, these two really go hand in hand. And so, at the Apereo conference before last, I think it was in Miami, we talked about community projects with different schools and vendors. At NYU, we worked with Longsight, and they had expressed interest for this up front. But it was there at that conference that Scriba and Notre Dame expressed their interest as well. So they all contributed to the development of this tool, while NYU provided the project management for it. Now, before going on, I'd like to talk a little bit about community projects in Sakai and point out that the Gradebook tool is just one of a number of different community projects that are really advancing Sakai. This is a bit of an old graphic here, so my apologies if anything here is out of date. But what we have here are currently active or recently completed projects, such as LEAP, the Lessons Enhancements project, STEP, the Samigo project, and Gradebook. Coming soon, there's going to be a Rally project for improved accessibility in Sakai, and there have been talks about a wiki integration down the line as well. So with these community projects in mind, for those of you who didn't have a chance to see Neil's farm off from earlier today, I highly recommend going and watching the recording later. The farm process that Neil talked about during that presentation is really aiming to provide a framework and tool set for folks to more easily get community projects like this off the ground in the future, which we think is going to be a huge step for the Sakai community and Apereo as a whole. But back to the Gradebook. So we had a number of guiding principles behind this project. Number one was to build on the current Sakai Gradebook. We focused on delivering something that was feature comparable with the current tool, so we weren't taking away any existing functionality from users. Next, we placed a heavy emphasis on competitive analysis. We looked not only at other Gradebook tools out there, but also at the interface interactions in a number of modern web applications. For example, Google Calendar, and the way that it allows you to be able to show or hide various calendars. There are a lot of really great approaches out there, and this allowed us to really zero in on some elegant interaction metaphors that are already well established, so we didn't feel the need to try and reinvent the wheel. Next, we had a tight scope, which allowed us to focus on specific goals without worrying too much about things like feature creep. We also wanted to achieve this with minimal changes to the back end. In fact, to date, I think we've only had to make one database change for the entire tool. And we wanted to approach this with an emphasis on accessibility and UX from the start. So, before we go on to talk about the technical details, I know you've all been waiting with bated breath to actually see this thing in action. So I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. We'll switch over, and I'm going to do a very brief live demo of the tool. So let me go ahead and switch over, and here it is. So here you can see that the spreadsheet interface dominates your view of the new Gradebook. We want to make this front and center for folks. And what we also wanted to do is be able to take all the various actions that were in the old Gradebook, strewed across a bunch of different screens, and here contextualize them. So while in the old Gradebook, you could have up to 7 different menus at the top of the screen. Here in the new one, you'll have a maximum of 4. If you don't have TAs to give permissions to, it'll only be 3. So I'm going to walk through the spreadsheet interface and point out the way this contextualizing of actions happens within the interface. So on the very left here, you can see that we've got a student's information column where you can see the student's name along with their user ID, and then a course grade for that student. And then as we scroll through the interface here, the rest of these columns are our Gradebook items. So you can see all the different information that was previously contained on the Gradebook item screen now shows up within the item headers. So we can see the total point value as well as its due date. There's also the average score for that item, but I'll get to that in a minute. There's also some icons that show up within this view as well, and we wanted to be able to make it very easy at a glance for people to be able to go in and see what settings are in place for their items. So if I click on this calculator icon, for example, I can see that it's not included in course grade calculation. Likewise, I can see this item is not released to students, or that this one is an extra credit Gradebook item. You can also see icons showing up next to certain items, tool names here. So this is actually the tool name for the various tool that this item is coming from. So here I can see the assignments icon, and if I click on it, it's telling me that it's coming from assignments. If I actually tried to edit any of the grades for this, I'll see this lock icon telling me that I cannot edit these grades because I have to go to that tool to be able to edit it. Additionally, at the very top here, because I have categories and weighting in place for my Gradebook, I can see this colored bar at the very top that encompasses the category for these different items. So I can see all of my homework items displayed here. as well as all my midterm items and all my participation items. I can also see a category subtotal at the very end of this category. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually turn off this grouping by category to have all my items just displayed. And in that case, the category subtotals would be displayed at the very end. So that's the basics of the interface. Things are popping up on my screen. Okay, so next I want to talk about that contextualizing of actions. So if I click on any of these drop-downs within the interface, it's going to show me things that I can accomplish for these items. So within the column headers, if I select this drop-down, it provides me with the ability to edit the item details, and it's going to open up as a light box or sort of a pop-up window over the interface so I don't lose my sense of place. I can also view grade statistics. And when I select this option, what it would do is it would show me not only the average for this item, but also some additional statistics that we thought might be useful. So means and medians, standard derivation, things like that. We've also got the ability to move these items around, which I'll get back to in a little bit, but we wanted to be able to provide this in an accessible way within the interface. And we have the ability to set score for empty cells. There's a feature in Gradebook 1 that allows you to, from I believe it's the course grade screen, to take all the null values in the gradebook and replace them with 0. It's actually a really important function at the end of the semester when you want to make sure that people that have missed assignments have accurate grades reflected. But it's also very encompassing. So we want to be able to provide the option to be able to do this on an item-by-item basis, and also to be able to choose the default score that gets applied to these empty cells. So you'll be able to do that on an item-by-item basis, although the option to do it for the entire gradebook, again with whatever score you choose, will be available within the settings menu. In individual cells, there are also drop-downs where I can view the grade log. So if I select this, I can view the history of scores for this particular cell. And I also have the ability to add comments for a cell here. So for Talia Tester, if I wanted to add a comment, a lightbox window opens. I can say, great job. And when I save the comment, a comment bubble appears in the upper right corner of the cell. Clicking on it will actually show the contents of that comment and allow me to go back and edit it again. So we also have a few other contextual drop-downs that we'll be applying within the interface. Within the course grades column, in the column header, you'll have the option as the instructor to choose what final course grade displays within your view. So you can choose whether you want to see letter grade, percentage, or if you don't have categories and weighting in place within your gradebook, points. And you can do any combination of those. Within the settings menu, you'll also be able to select these options for what students will see for their course grade. There will also be a drop-down within individual cells for the course grade, allowing you to do your grade override and to view the override log. So those are the contextual actions within this interface. Next, I'd like to be able to talk about what it is to be able to see like a holistic overview of a student's grades. We call it a grade summary screen. So in the old gradebook, there isn't really an easy way to be able to get to that, to be able to see a sort of view site as for a particular student. So we want to be able to provide the option to click on a student's name, have a lightbox window open, and here I can see in a very simple way that sort of mirrors the student's own view of the gradebook, all the scores for that student, including anything that's hidden or not released to that student. So I can look through this from an instructor's perspective and also navigate to the next student if I'd like, or the previous student. One thing that came about during our user testing, however, was that instructors would frequently want to sit down and actually go through grades with a student. And the particular use case that came up was that instructors would have a student coming into their office hours, and because they didn't have an easy way to show students their grades, they would actually take a piece of paper and hold it in front of their screen to obscure other students' data. We thought we could make this a little bit easier for folks. So if you enter into student review mode, what's going to happen is it's going to hide any information that shouldn't be released to that student. And as you can see here, it's going to apply a Gaussian blur in the background to obscure any other student's information. So you can be confident that you're only seeing what that student is able to see for the gradebook at that point in time. In fact, if I try to close out of it, it will tell me that unreleased grades and other students' data will become visible. I have to confirm that before going back here. So that's all well and good, but what about the actual process of using the gradebook? So we want to make this as easy as possible. So let's go through and very quickly add a new gradebook item. I'm going to click that. It's going to bring up a new lightbox window, and this may look very familiar to users because this is the same Add Gradebook Item screen as was in Gradebook 1. We wanted to maintain familiarity wherever possible. So let me go through and add a new item, give it a point value, assign it to a category, and sure, let's keep the release settings there. When I click Create, sorry, my computer's been a little bit slow today. There we go. It says new item's been created. So the gradebook's going to actually scroll over if need be, and it's going to highlight the new item that was created so that I can see it directly here within the interface. Now let's see what the actual grading process looks like. So I'm going to click on a cell, enter a score, and you can see that it's going to show the maximum point value that's out of right in that cell. And now, just like if I was in Excel, I can click enter or click out of that cell, and you might have seen that little green check mark that appeared. That meant that the score was validated and saved for me right there, which is really nice because I don't need to go then and click a save button. I can just rest assured that the content that I'm adding has gotten saved. So let me try it again now, but this time let me do something a little different. I'll apply 110 points out of 100. Because it's validating these scores, it's now going to pop this little plus icon into the cell. And if I click on that, it's telling me that this is over the maximum point value and is effectively providing extra credit for that particular student. Likewise, if I ever entered any scores that were invalid or if the gradebook wasn't able to save properly, I would get error notifications that would be persistent within the cell as well. So it's also worth noting here as well that the keyboard that the gradebook is fully keyboard navigable. And this is nice not only because it mirrors what people are used to with Excel, being able to tab or reverse tab or be able to use the arrow keys to navigate through the interface, but it also makes the gradebook fully accessible. Okay, so I know we have about 13 minutes left. Just very briefly, I just want to talk through the import-export process, then we can get back to the presentation. So if I go into import-export, this was an area we thought we could really improve and simplify things. So now rather than having multiple processes, now if I select download gradebook, it gives me an Excel file. I can then update scores or create new items by just adding a new title and point value in a new column. And then I can import that back into the tool. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to scan the contents of that file, and it's going to show me if there are any new or updated scores, or if something just has no changes and there's no need to import it, and it'll show me new items that I can create. So I can selectively choose from columns that I want to update or create. And when I then click continue from there, if I'm creating new items, it will take me through the item creation process. So it's one very simple, straightforward, linear process for importing individual grades or your entire grade book. Okay. So I didn't touch on everything that's happening within the new gradebook, but at the very end, we'll show a link to the gradebook wiki that we have on the Sakai wiki, where there are other videos that go through in more detail everything within the gradebook. But let me go back to our presentation, and let me hand it over to Steve to talk about the technical information.
Oh, sorry, there we go. Thanks very much, Carl. Okay, so I'll just bring up my notes here. Alrighty, so for the technical pieces, so the Gradebook NG project is built pretty much on top of a project called Apache Wicket, and this is a very mature framework. It's been around for about 10 years. It's got a very active open source community, which is actually very important when we're dealing with Sakai, because we need the features and fixes to be flowing from that other project so that we can always have the latest in Sakai. We don't have to worry about bugs happening in our versions. And of course, with Gradebook NG being a new project, we decided to take the latest version of Wicket, which is Wicket 6, although since we took that, there's now Wicket 7. So you can see it's very, very active, and at some point we may upgrade to that. I actually started using Wicket about 7 years ago, so pretty much right from its infancy, and I've grown really fond of it over that time. And it's really nice watching the new releases get better and better as they come out. There's several other tools using Wicket in Sakai, so it's certainly not a new approach. And I think the best thing that we have about Wicket is there's a really great separation of concerns in regards to the presentation. It's just standard HTML templates, and then there's logic that ties all that together in the background. So that's the Java code. And that was really important when we started out with Gradebook NG, because we knew from the start, with the mix of people that we had, that we would really need to leverage that separation of concerns. So Peyton, the other developer that Kyle mentioned, he is more front-end focused, so a lot of JavaScript, CSS, accessibility pieces, that's his forte. And myself, I'm a lot more back-end focused, so on the data layer, the business services, and grabbing all that data and mixing it up. So what's happened a lot over as we have progressed through the project is that we'll create the feature, add all the back-end services, all the data layer pieces in, and then it may not look very pretty, but what we'll do is then we'll hand it over to Peyton for styling, bringing it into line, adding in additional pieces that we have, accessibility pieces, things like that. So it's really the separation of concerns in Wicket is what enables that. So I think we've chosen a really good framework for doing this. So the Wicket has a very rich set of components, different forms, drop-downs, auto-completes, things like that, editable labels. And Ajax is actually built into Wicket itself. So even though it's a Java framework, you can do Ajax calls directly from within the Java. And the logic's all encapsulated inside that Java code. So if you hear me mention Ajax, you may actually be thinking of things like jQuery. Underneath, Wicket uses libraries like that. We did look at a number of components to help us, a number of different Wicket components to help us, but since, as you saw in the demo, we have a number of different pieces inside each cell. So we've got the grade, we've got a drop-down menu, we've got various icons and notifications. What we ended up doing was going with native Wicket itself, and we built on some top of those native components ourselves. Wicket was actually really well designed for this. So it has a very nice base set of data tables and columns and cells and things that we can actually add in all of the different pieces that we need. So it was actually really nice to be able to work with something that was so flexible. As you saw, the main part of the application is that editable grid, and those are Ajax cells. And what happens is when you click into the cell and type in the and type in the grade, each cell gets validated and updated in the back end whenever you click away or key away from the cell. As you saw, we have a lot of modal windows to keep the context on the main page, so we can do all our updates in the background without changing the different pages. There has only been one back-end change in terms of the database. We were aiming for 0, but in the end we actually had to have 1. It is backwards compatible though. The other storage that we're using, so for things like the grouping and the ordering, we're using site and tool properties. So whenever you drag things around, that gets persisted in the back end as a site property. We did create our own business service for grabbing all of the different pieces and interfacing with the rest of the Sakai, the different Sakai APIs. And we also contributed a whole bunch, I think maybe 30 different enhancements to the actual Gradebook service underneath. And again, these are all backwards compatible. And finally, for driving the front end, because I mentioned some of those things are JavaScript, pure JavaScript, we built a couple of RESTful entity providers. So these are like RESTful web services that can drive the back end from the front end. Kyle, if you could just go to the next page.
Yep, already there.
Oh, yep, done, sweet. Okay, so the approach that we took is that we load up the whole data set of students and assignments. We were thinking about potentially adding infinite scroll or like a load more feature, but through our testing, we showed that it isn't really needed. We can load up hundreds of students with multiple assignments, everyone with a grade, and it will render really quickly. In terms of accessibility, we did have an accessibility review and worked with a partner for that. And because of the different, because of Wicket having the HTML templates, we can add the required markup for accessibility. So the ARIA attributes, we can add them directly onto the templates. So it was quite easy to add what we needed to do there. I think that's about it for the technical pieces. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Back to you, Carl.
Great. So before we get to questions, I'd just like to close by pointing out that the Gradebook tool is currently available for testing in Nightly Experimental Trunk. We'll be making the tool available in Master Trunk sometime the next week or two. Look forward to having people play around with it. We also have additional information, including previous webinar recordings, available in the Sakai wiki. So I thought this might be the easiest way. Feel free to search in the wiki for Gradebook enhancements, and you should be able to find it there. So, questions?
Fabulous. So we had a bunch of questions come in. Of course, we had some great comments about your wonderful presentation. The improvements are wonderful. Thanks for the great work. So one of the questions was, and I share this one first, it's one of the later ones, but I share this one first just in case it, and you did provide that link just now, but someone wanted to know if there's a link available for a demo that they can show on the NG Gradebook if they were sharing it with anyone. I know the recording will be available from this session within a week.
Okay, yeah, and we also have, we do have other videos from previous webinars on that wiki page that go into even more detail, walking through each of the different screens within the gradebook. So if you want to be able to look through it more, you can find information there, and then we'll have more videos coming soon.
Fabulous. Okay. Someone asked, where do you see the organization? Now, you might have answered some of these, so you might want to just answer them in short instead of showing. Where do you see the organization of the gradebook and the categories? Was that under settings?
Yes. So in settings, that's where you'll set up your categories and weighting, and that's where you'll be able to see all of your different categories. Although when you are grouped by category, which is on by default, you will see all of your categories listed from left to right on the screen.
Okay, and we had a comment from Jonas. He said, I have to say that your GUI is extremely easy on the eyes. Could you elaborate on the gap analysis between Gradebook, Gradebook 2, and Gradebook NG?
Sure, absolutely. So there was a presentation earlier today about Gradebook 2, specifically in relation to Gradebook NG. But as far as Gradebook and this new Gradebook, there is really no gap there because they are feature comparable. They're built on the same back end, so they are fundamentally the same tool, and all the same functionality is there. It's just displayed in a little bit of an easier fashion. As far as Gradebook 2 is concerned, I know that the big thing with Gradebook 2 is the ability to do weighting on an individual item level in addition to the category level. So that's something that wasn't really available in the original Gradebook, and at least for now, what we've really tried to do is make this feature comparable with the original Gradebook, Gradebook 1 tool.
Okay. Is it possible to attach a feedback in the Gradebook?
Yes, in the form of comments. You can add comments to any of the cells within your gradebook, so you can comment on a student's grade from there.
Okay, so I would assume, I don't know necessarily what this person is referring to. If they're referring to attaching like a feedback file, I would assume that's still through assignments, not through Gradebook.
Right, that would be through the assignments tool.
Okay, will you be able, so when you enter a 0 or a grade, can you back out of a grade to return to a null value?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Someone asked, can I add Gradebook NG to Sakai 10.2 for a pilot?
That's a good question. Steve, I think that I'm not too sure. What do you think, Steve?
I think you can. There is one additional database column you need, which is in the Sakai 11 database conversion script already. But I think it should work fine. I can't think of anything why it wouldn't.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. There are Gradebook service changes that we need. They would need to be ported as well.
Okay, so we're running short on time, but let's get these done. Will the comments bubble icon indicate if comments are being sent from other tools?
They should, yes. Yes.
Okay.
So if you have feedback within the assignments tool, because that displays as a comment within the gradebook, it should display through there. Steve, I think that's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you go back a slide to display the wiki link? Is one that just
Sure.
came in.
Yeah, so I don't have the actual link here. I think the easiest way is to just go to the Sakai wiki and search for this. The link itself is very long. So when we add this to our presentation in Try Sakai, we can make sure to include the actual link.
Great. When you remove an item from the gradebook when modifying, what happens when you remove an item when modifying an exported file?
When you remove an item from the spreadsheet file, it's not going to be removed when you re-import, because the purpose of the spreadsheet is to be able to selectively import whichever columns you prefer. So if it doesn't see a column that's already existing within the gradebook as a gradebook item, it's not going to remove anything.
Okay.
But you can go through the actual gradebook interface and just select the drop down to remove an item if you'd like.
Okay, we had a question, is there a drop highest or lowest score? I would assume so. That was available in gradebook 2, so it would be a regression without.
Yes, so that'll be available because that is available in Gradebook 1 for the categories and weighting to be able to drop highest, keep highest, and drop lowest.
Okay, great. I think that covers everything. We did have a comment saying that they have a small pilot for Canvas next spring, but they want to know what Sakai 11 can do, especially with Gradebook NG. So I do believe the resources you provided will be able to provide that as well. One more question I missed. Are comments only seen by the instructor or students as well?
When you release an item to students and students can access the gradebook, they'll be able to see the comments provided for them. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. All right, I think that wraps us up, and we are a little 2 minutes over. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. That concludes our session. I think we're all set.
All
Thank you
right. Well, thank you all
so
very
very
much.
much. Yes, thank you, Kyle and Steve. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.